Thank you, Paul, and thank you to the AHDB for the invitation to speak here again today. My name is Julian McGill. I'm an economist at LMC International at our headquarters in Oxford, and I'm going to be speaking on the oilseeds market. And I'm fully aware that it says grain market outlook in big letters behind me, so perhaps this is an unusual topic to be talking about, but hopefully you'll find it interesting anyway. I'm going to start by looking at both the cereals and the oilseeds market. The reason I'm going to do this is that I'm hoping to show you that these markets have been transformed by biofuels policy. Biofuels based in the US on maize and in the EU on vegetable oils have been the cause of the high prices of the past commodity cycle. Now, the reason I'm going to go to some lengths to try and convince you of this is that once you accept this premise, it changes how you look at the vegetable oil markets. And what I'm hoping to convince you is that the fundamental cause today of the weak prices in the vegetable oil market is the weak crude oil price and the lack of any push from biofuels policy. But there are some more upbeat messages in this as well. Jack was just saying that the cure for high prices is high prices. Well, in the inverse, the cure for low prices is low prices. We are seeing some adjustments on the supply side, which will lead to, hopefully, some firming of the prices. So I'll finish on a more upbeat picture. Let's start here. Here is a picture of global agriculture since 1985 in one graph. And what we've plotted here is the global harvested area, courtesy of the FAO. So that is in every country for every crop, every bit of land harvested. You can see in 1985, global harvested area was around 1.1 billion hectares. And that number didn't change much up to 2002. Perhaps it went up slightly to 1.15, but it was pretty static. It's not to suggest that there weren't shifts in the area being harvested. Some areas declined, others came into production, but overall the world had no need to increase its global harvested area. There was no pressure. Yield growth was enough to meet demand growth. From 2002, something remarkable happens. You have a sustained increase in global harvested area. It is moving up and up and up, from a flat to an increase. And this is the period that we've just been through. This is the period of the great commodity cycle. This is the period of high crop prices, leading to high land prices, incentivizing the growth in agricultural area. There's the American wit, Will Rogers, was once asked what to invest in, and he said, buy land, they're not making any more of the stuff. Well, in terms of agricultural land, he'd be wrong. Because actually, with high prices, we've seen a huge growth in both the intensification of area and also new areas opening up in Brazil, in Argentina, across the world. But what we have here is really quite an odd puzzle. Why in 2002 did it change? What caused agricultural area to suddenly have to increase? Well, one way of looking at this is to distinguish between the two main crops, between the two main crop groups, cereal and oilseeds. Together, they account for 2/3 of global harvested area. And so what we've done here is we've plotted the cumulative growth in area under oil crops and under cereal crops. So on the top there, you can see the oil crops. You can see they're increasing consistently. So this is soybeans, rapeseed, sunflower, and then also oil palm. So all of the oil crops, the oilseeds, and the other ones. Bottom, we've plotted the area, cumulative area under cereals. And you can see that until 2002, that area was declining. So you had a consistent growth in the oilseed area, but the cereal area was declining. And in fact, by 2002, the cereal area had declined by approximately the same amount as the growth in the area under oil crops. So there were shifts in the harvested area, but what was happening was that cereals were handing over harvested area to oil crops. That's not to say that cereal production during that period was declining. Yield growth was sufficient for production to meet demand, whilst also freeing up area for oilseeds. But then in 2002, the moment at which we enter the commodity cycle, the moment at which harvested area has to increase, what you see is a reversal of the trend in cereal area. From 2002 onwards, both oil crops and cereal crops are increasing their harvested area. And that is putting the world under pressure, and that is requiring these huge new areas to come into production. What I've done, in effect, now is I've taken one mystery. Why did the crop area change in 2002, and I've turned it into two mysteries. Why on earth were oilseed crops increasing consistently, and why were cereal crops declining and then increasing? Well, for oil crops, we have to think in terms of two products. When you take an oilseed and you process it, you get both the vegetable oil and the vegetable meal. And they have different end-use markets. So if you take the vegetable oil, it's consumed, you all know this, it's consumed either for frying goods or as tabletop oil or in any of these ways. The vegetable meal isn't consumed directly by humans, it's consumed by animals. And so it's a derived demand, derived from the demand for meat. So what we've done here is we've plotted both per capita demand for vegetable oil and per capita demand for meat across a cross-section of different countries. If you take on the left vegetable oil, you can see there's quite a nice relationship there. When you look at wealthier countries, they consume more vegetable oil per year per person. As people become wealthier, they eat out more, they eat more fried goods, they eat more. There are outliers here. If you look at the USA, high income, even higher vegetable oil consumption than their income would imply. The reason for this is obvious. They eat out a lot, they eat a lot. Look at Japan, bottom left, high income, but actually a much lower vegetable oil consumption per capita. This is due to the Japanese diet. Interesting, if you look at the EU, it's pretty much exactly on trend, on the fit line there. But if you look to the left, you'll see China, much lower level of income, has pretty much the same per capita vegetable oil consumption as the EU already, which is quite interesting. So there are differences in the dietary issues, all of the rest of this, but in general, we can say vegetable consumption increases with increasing income. Meat consumption on the right, same relationship. Once again, the same outliers, actually. Look at the USA, higher meat consumption than their income would imply. Japan, due to their diets, lower consumption. Bigger divergence between the EU and China. China may have reached vegetable consumption similar to the EU, but they are still far behind when it comes to meat consumption per capita, suggesting there's still a lot of growth in that section. I say meat consumption, where's this meat coming from? What we've done here is we've plotted production from the main livestock, so we've got bovine meat, that's beef, pig meat, poultry meat, since 1961. And alongside that, I've plotted aquaculture as well, just out of interest. If you go back to 1961, you'll see the largest source of meat in the world was beef, bovine meat. But it hasn't grown very quickly. By the end of the 70s, pork becomes a bigger source of meat. And in fact, by 2011, pork is overtaken by chicken. And today, even the US, the beef-eating country, consumes more chicken per capita than beef. You'll also notice, perhaps even more remarkably, today aquaculture, and this includes finfish, mollusks, crustaceans, it excludes all aquatic plants, it's pretty much the same as the consumption of beef. The reason for that is that remarkable level of growth. In fact, what this is telling you is that certain species have been growing a lot quicker than other ones. Beef has been the slowest growing. And the reason for this is how quickly they convert feed into meat. You're looking at the species here that are growing the fastest, the ones with the lowest basal metabolism that can convert their feed into meat more quickly. So if you're looking to feed ever-growing populations with higher per capita meat consumption, these are the species you focus on. They're also the species that breed faster. The average sow is pregnant for about, I think, 110 days in the US, the average cow for 280. So these are breeding much quicker. There's something else all of these species have in common, and that is they consume more vegetable meal. And that has had a big impact on demand for oil crops. What we've plotted here is the soy meal price as a percentage of the maize price. Now, the reason we're using soybeans is that soybeans really are the gold standard in terms of vegetable meal. It's the highest protein, it has the best amino acid profile. I'm told it has the best palatability. Presumably that's from livestock's point of view. I don't think it's from a human point of view. And what you can see here is that since 1950, the soy, with a lot of jumping up and down, with a lot of fluctuations, soy meal as a percentage of the maize price has increased. The market has been signaling we need more soybeans. And it's hardly surprising because they are feeding more animals that require high-protein diets. So what's all of this to say? Well, what we've done here is, and funnily enough, this actually matches very much what Jack was just saying. I hadn't seen Jack's presentation, so it's a nice, happy coincidence. What we've plotted here is global real GDP per person over the last 30 years, so that's the average, alongside food consumption of soybeans per person per year on the right-hand side. And what you can see, and we've shown the relationship there, if you look at the yellow dots, as income has increased, soybean consumption has grown. People are consuming more vegetable oils per capita, they're consuming more meat per capita and of species which require more vegetable meal. So really this is telling you why on earth that oils crop area has been increasing so consistently since 1985. In the jargon, it has a high income elasticity. These are crops that as people become wealthier, they demand more of, whether directly through vegetable oil or indirectly through meat and meal. What we've also done is we've plotted maize and wheat consumption in tons per person per year, food consumption, alongside GDP. And what you'll see is there's been a slight increase in maize, as it's also used as a feed. Wheat, in fact, actually, as the income's been increasing, it's been declining. There are some regions where bread consumption is still growing, but overall, as people become wealthier, they tend to switch away from bread into fried goods, into meats. And so that tells you why until 2002, you were getting this decline in the area under cereals. You have yields in cereals growing, and you don't have a growth in per capita consumption, because people, as they get richer, are not consuming more cereal goods. They are consuming more vegetable oils. But of course, this doesn't tell us why on earth in 2002 we had this reversal. And the answer for that is we need to look at non-food uses. What we've plotted here is the share of maize, all vegetable oils, and then a selection of the main ones, rapeseed, soy, and palm oil, used as biofuels. And I showed this last year. I didn't include maize that year, but I mentioned this is one of my favorite diagrams, and it still is, because I think it's absolutely remarkable. I think it's something that people do not pay enough attention to. In 2002, the share of maize, which is in that yellowish color there, was around 2.5%, 3% used as biofuels, so used for ethanol and blended in with petrol. From 2002 onwards, that share increases as the US rolls out its mandates. And it goes up to the point where, by 2010, more than 15% of global maize is being used as a biofuel. It is being turned into ethanol and blended with petrol. In the US at that point, about 40%, 2/5 of US maize is being used as ethanol. And this is the additional demand that suddenly requires area under cereal crops to increase. The timing is perfect. From 2002 onwards, with the increase in biofuel use of maize, you get a reversal in the area under cereals. And that's what puts pressure on the global agricultural system. They are now having to meet increased demand both from all crops, which has been consistently growing since 1985, and from non-food use of maize. Of course, what we're also showing here is vegetable oils, because while the US is focusing their attention on maize and ethanol, the EU is rolling out mandates using vegetable oils, using vegetable-based methyl esters blended in with diesel. And so we can see here is the total oils, which is in that, I guess it's black or dark brown color. From about 2005 onwards, also increases pretty quickly, reaching also above 15%. And this is total global vegetable oils. And what's particularly noticeable is if you look at rapeseed oil, which is the vegetable oil which we have used in the EU, which we grow in the EU, that share increases by 2010 to 1/3 of all global rapeseed oil supply being used as biofuels. This has a profound impact on prices and on demand. So I said that diagram was my favorite diagram. I've been trying to convince people for years about the importance of that diagram, and I don't think I'm really getting there, to be honest. So what I've done this time round, to make this even clearer, is I've taken food consumption of vegetable oils, oleochemical production from vegetable oils, and biofuel production from vegetable oils in the EU. So this is from domestically grown vegetable oil, from imported vegetable oil, whether imported as an oilseed or imported directly as the oil, and it's the consumption in the EU. And first thing you'll notice, if you look at the food consumption of vegetable oils at the bottom, from 1980 onwards, it's about doubled since 1980. So over 35 years, you've about doubled food consumption of vegetable oil. Growth was more rapid up to 2000. Since then, it's plateaued with high per capita consumption. It's not particularly exciting. Oleochemical use is even less exciting because we also have high per capita use of fatty alcohols and fatty acids. There hasn't been much growth in that market. And a lot of the production has also migrated to Southeast Asia. So it's a pretty static volume there. But what really stands out is if you calculate how much vegetable oil has been going into biofuel production since 2000, you can see that has been the source of the growth in the EU. And in fact, it reached the point by 2015 where it's about 13 million tons. It's about the same volume of vegetable oil that goes into food consumption is going into biofuel consumption. And this biofuel, incidentally, includes not just biodiesel, which is what the mandates were initially based on, but also the direct burning of vegetable oil to create electricity and also the creation of renewable diesel, HVO and the like. You can see it's a huge, huge volume. And it's what's accounted for the growth over the last 15 years or so. And of course, this has an impact on prices, or at least we believe it has an impact on prices. What we've plotted here are the prices of the main vegetable oils, soybean oil, crude palm oil, rapeseed oil, sunflower oil, at Rotterdam, alongside the North Sea, the Brent crude oil price. And if you look at this diagram, what you'll see is a very striking pattern. There's a price band here. If you use your fingers and squint, you can basically draw it with your own hand. You can see here that the vegetable oils are ranked approximately on their value, what you would expect. Sunflower, rapeseed as higher value ones are at the top. Palm oil, sourdough oil at the bottom. But they're moving in a pattern. And the floor to this price band seems to be held by the Brent crude oil price. Now, why should there be this relationship? Well, our argument is that when you reach January 2007, when you reach the year 2007, about 7%, see this in the earlier diagram, of vegetable oils are being used as biodiesel. And that, in our opinion, is enough for the tail to start to wag the dog. You have a situation where, even though it's a relatively small amount, you can start to influence, the crude oil price can start to influence the vegetable oil price. And the way that works is, because the EU's biodiesel blending mandates are set out over a year, so the way it works is, as an obligated party, you have to blend a certain proportion of biodiesel in with your diesel over the course of a year. But it doesn't specify exactly when. So if you're an obligated party, what do? You look at the spread between the vegetable oil prices and the crude oil price. And when the vegetable oil prices come down relative to the crude oil price is when you start to blend, because it's cheaper for you. You can meet your mandates at a lower cost. Conversely, when the prices go high enough, you draw back on the blending. And through this system, you are removing stocks off the market based on the crude oil price. And that's why you can see this beautiful pattern here with the vegetable oil prices essentially following the crude oil price. Now, why should they all follow the crude oil price? Well, the reason for that really is you have substitution between different vegetable oils. There are some restrictions, whether it's a GM oil or whether it's a saturated oil, but in effect, based on price, you can substitute between oils. So when you're taking volumes of oil out of one side of the market, other vegetable oil has to come in. So through that, the crude oil price can start to direct the vegetable oil price. Now, I said that crude oil is the floor of this price band. And in fact, if you look at 2012, you can see that that floor was tested. If you follow the crude palm oil price, the yellow price, in 2012, and you follow it downwards, you see that it collides with the crude oil price. Bounces back up, collides again in 2013 and again in 2014, and hasn't collided in 2015. So what's happening at these moments? Well, if you agree with us that there seems to be a very strong pattern here, and it seems logical that through this mechanism the crude oil price should be able to influence the vegetable oil price, you have to start looking not at the vegetable oil price itself, the crude palm oil price in this case, but its premium over crude oil. So what we've done here is we've plotted the crude palm oil premium over crude oil, over Brent North Sea oil. And that's the green line there, and it's measured on the left-hand axis. And so those moments that I highlighted earlier where crude palm oil was coming and hitting the floor of the price band and was at parity, those are the moments here on this graph where the CPO premium over Brent at 2012, 2013, and 2014 is at zero. So what's happening at these moments? Well, in effect, when crude palm oil in Rotterdam is at the same price as crude oil, you don't need any incentive from the government to use it as a fuel. And our argument has been that at these moments, people will take advantage of it and will start blending in the free market outside of any government requirements vegetable methyl ester into diesel. And in fact, I haven't put these in now for lack of time, but you'll see they're in your handout there. If you look at the daily prices, you can see exactly this happening. Prices drop to under zero, remain under zero for a little bit, and then people start blending, and this pushes the price back up. And this is all reinforced by the fact that in Southeast Asia, crude palm oil is cheap because you're netting out the freight. And in fact, if you want to get really technical, inside Indonesia, due to differential export taxes, on occasion it's even cheaper. And so that creates a link, a permanent link, not related on policy anymore, but a permanent link between vegetable oil price and the crude oil price. So what's driving down the premium? Well, so what we've also plotted here is MPOB stocks, that's the Malaysian Palm Oil Board stocks of palm oil. They're the only stocks available, they're the only indicator. And we've plotted them alongside the premium. And what you can see is a rather nice inverse relationship. If you look at 2012, the point at which the price came right down, this was a period of very high stocks. Stocks were accumulating, the CPO price was being pushed down, it hit parity with Brent, free market biodiesel blending became viable, and stocks started to come down again, and the price recovered. Doesn't always work. In 2013, we had a situation where people expected stocks to get very high. They didn't. The price briefly bobbed down and came back up again. 2014, we had a weakness last year. Last year was a very interesting year. We had a weakness across all large production of seed oil, large crushing of seed oil. Prices were right down, and you see CPO stocks going up and the premium coming right down. This year, we've actually been rather fortunate because right now we have very high MPOB stocks, and they're likely to get even slightly higher, but actually the CPO premium of Brent has held up quite well. And one of the reasons for that is there's been a lot of concern over the effect of an El Nino, and a lot of people very worried about that and what that'll do for production. But actually, if we look at the previous diagram, CPO could be much lower if it were to come down to the Brent crude price. So actually, we've been rather fortunate. It sounds odd because we have very low prices, but from this point of view, we've been rather lucky that they've kept up as high as they have. Now, why am I talking to you about palm oil? None of you plant oil palm, or if you do, none of you plant it successfully. But the reason palm oil is so important is because, well, firstly, it is the largest vegetable oil in the market, ahead of soybean oil, has been since about 2007. The other thing is the nature of the oil palm as a crop. The oil palm is a tree crop. It yields throughout the year, produces these fresh fruit bunches, these large bunches that are harvested continuously. So palm oil is constantly being brought to the market, as a result of which it is the cheapest priced vegetable oil. It's the one that has to price itself in. An oil palm producer is essentially like a distressed seller. They are constantly producing. They're not lucky like rapeseed farmers where they can hold onto their stocks and wait to crush. They have to bring it to the market all the time. And that's why it's those accumulation of stocks that are particularly important. And that's why palm oil always shows the weakness. At the same time, though, as I mentioned, you have substitution between vegetable oils. So a weak palm oil price, and in fact we saw this in 2014, if you have a very weak palm oil price and you have weak additional vegetable oil prices, softseed prices, all these prices can get compressed down. So what we've done here is we've plotted sunflower oil, soybean oil, and rapeseed oil premium over palm oil. You can see 2014, during the great harvests and great crushing, it was very, very low. Since then, the premium have actually improved. And the reason for that is that people have cut back on their production. Why have they cut back on production? Well, price signals. The price signals are that it is not worth planting in a lot of occasions. So what we've plotted here, this is the EU rape versus wheat revenue differential per hectare against the rape area as a percentage of the wheat area. And what you can see, as you would expect, that when the rape to wheat differential becomes worse, as it has now, because rapeseed prices are low, you get a decline in the rape area as a percentage of the wheat area. So markets are adjusting. They're seeing the problems in the vegetable oil areas. What does this mean for future prices? Well, what we've got here are the rapeseed canola production from last year, this year, and the forecasts. And what you can see is, as would be suggested by the previous diagram, European Union is seeing a decline in production. Canada, due to the poor harvest, due to the poor weather, has seen a decline in production. In fact, everywhere, apart from India, has seen a decline in production. And the fascinating thing about India is that if you look at rapeseed oil, rapeseed is a smallholder crop. The mills are all very small. They're still part of a sort of Gandhian approach to economic development. And so most rapeseed farmers will go to the mill, crush their rapeseed, leave the meal there as a payment for the service, take the oil home and consume it themselves. So none of this enters the market, as a result of which that uptick in Indian production is unlikely to have a strong effect. So we're in a situation where the crude oil price is weak, but the CPO price is holding up better than we would have hoped, and that's giving some stability to other prices. And this suggests that the rapeseed oil price, with declining production, the premium should be maintained. The market is reacting correctly. It's pulling back on the production. The one issue is with soybeans. Mentioned earlier, soybean is the miracle crop that keeps growing, that you need for your livestock. Livestock consumption is going up, meat consumption is going up, soybean production is looking strong, and more importantly, that soybean crushing is looking healthy. So in effect, the soybean oil price premium is likely to come down. So what's the sort of summary of all of this? Well, we're at the tail end, really, of a remarkable series of transformations in vegetable markets. Pressures from biofuels were the cause of the great commodity cycle of the past decade, and their legacy is to have left vegetable prices linked to the crude oil price. And the weak crude oil price, I'm hoping to convince you, is really the source of the weak vegetable prices. But within that dour look, we have got some situations where things are improving. And what we need to look at is the palm oil price and palm oil production. And with lower fertilizer application, palm oil production is declining over time. And that is giving some additional support to soft seed oil vegetable oil prices. But not to soybean oil, because soybean oil is being crushed for the meal. So it's not a completely happy picture, but it's a slightly better one than you may have hoped at the outlook. Thank you very much for your time.